Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Taraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay. So we're going to continue with Bet Yosef. We were saying, Umori Rabbeinu Yonah, right? We started with Rabbeinu Yonah. Katav dechol she'efshar l'dei shaliach. I'm sorry, this is the wrong place. No, not this, not this. Now we're getting closer. Yeah, I think it was the right place. Okay, whatever.
Kavod Taraf, yeah, that's the right place. I have in my notes, Bet Yosef here, Rabbeinu Yonah.
Okay, very good. So yeah, something threw me off there. Anyway, it says like this: "Dechol she'efshar al yedei shaliach keget v'shchita כוונת העומד על גביו ככוונת העושה מעשה. דהבה כשליח." So he says, right, that whenever it's possible, by way of an emissary, agent, like when it comes to a get or when it comes to shchita, when it comes to slaughter, so he says that the intention of the person who's watching over this person is considered to be ככוונת העושה מעשה. It's considered to be like the person who's actually doing the actual act. דהבה כשליח. Why? Because it's like his emissary. So therefore, it says when it comes to get, it's kosher. אבל שוטה והוא הדין בשחיטה, אילו היה גדול עומד על גביו, אבל חליצה. So it says, but when it comes to, right, the person who's retarded, I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. Afilu shote, right? Even somebody who's retarded, it could also work with that. והוא הדין בשחיטה, same thing also applies with the slaughter. אילו היה גדול עומד על גביו, if there was somebody standing on top of him, an adult, אבל חליצה, but when it comes to חליצה, he says, דאי אפשר על ידי שליח, you can't do חליצה with a שליח, with an emissary. אף כוונת העומד על גביו לא מהניה. So then, right, also, if somebody's watching over him, standing there watching over, mashgiach, right, as we said, doesn't help you here in this case, he says, right, when it comes to chalitza. Okay, good. So, ben b'shoteh, ben b'cheresh, right, whether it's somebody who's retarded or somebody who's deaf-mute, b'katan, or his child, or לפי דברי רבנו יונה, מצא שלושה חרש בקטן, שורש שוטה בקטן, ושאחרים עומדים על גביהם יוצאים by, right? So it says, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, if you make a matzah, right, and you have somebody watching over, and these three categories of people, right, made the matzah, so he says, actually, you can fulfill your obligation like that, according to Rabbeinu Yonah. מסתבר לי שהכל תלוי בהוכחה, it says, it seems to me reasonable, he says, that it all depends on the proof. The beget דיקתא הוכחה גמורה כשאחרים עומדים על גביהן. Why? Because he says when it comes to the get, right, that there is real proof when somebody's standing over him, right? אפילו שוטה כשר, even somebody who's retarded is kosher. ודבר שאין בו הוכחה, but it's something which doesn't have proof, כלל, there's no proof, כשחיטה אף בשאחרים, כשחיטה, like a slaughter, even if others are עומדים על גביהם, even if others are watching them, אינם כשרים, they're not kosher. אבל בחליצה, when it comes to חליצה, דיקה הוכחה, Tzat, you have a little bit of a proof there. Cheresh katan ksherim. So then the deaf mute and the child are kosher. Al yedei mashe melamdim otan, by way of how we teach them how to do. We instruct them. Ha'omdim al gabehem, the one who stands over them. Aval shoteh, but when it comes to retard, the lav bar datu, because he doesn't really have intellect. That's the problem, Klal, at all. Right? Lo. Then you cannot use that. ולפי זה, אף במצה כן. So it says, according to that, even for matzah, it's the same thing. דהה לקה הוכחה כלל, because there's no proof there. וכשחיטה היא. So it's just like slaughter. דלקה הוכחה כלל. There's also no proof there. הילקח, אף בשאחרים עומדים על גביהם. So he says, therefore, even if you have somebody standing over them, אין יוצאים בה, you don't fully obligation like that. וזה הדעת נראה, שנטע הפייט שכתב סתם עד כנשנו. Right, so he says, right, that's the way it seems. That he wrote, when he wrote this, right, he says payat, payat is like a poet. Payat, right, you see like the similarity with the language, right? Payat, poet, right? So in other words, these are people who write poetry, like songs, like poems, with music, whatever, all kinds of things like this. So it must be he's referring to some kind of poet that wrote something, in his time, whatever. Whatever it is. That's not really crucial for us, right? So in other words, Rabbeinu Yonah seems to have a different opinion here, regarding this. He's a little bit more lenient, a little bit more, right, the way he's a little bit more right, avant-garde, maverick, the way he thinks about this. He analyzes it in a very, very unique way. But anyway, right, whatever, right, it is what it is. Probably we don't paskin like that, I imagine we don't go like that. To make a differentiation between this guy and that guy, right? The deaf mute and the child and the retard. It sounds a little bit too avant-garde. Okay, so whatever, we'll see how it goes, right? וזה לשון אורחות חיים. So that's the language of אורחות חיים. Another rabbi, right? לשע גוי וחרש שוטה וקטן. So it says if it was needed by a goy or or the deaf mute, right, as we said, the child and the retard, אף אגב דאפיה ישראל לא יצא. Even though it was baked by a Jew, you didn't fulfill your obligation like that. והרש והריף והרמב"ן כתבו שאין נחוש מי הלש והאופה. So interesting, right? He says, right, that the Rash and the Rif and the Ramban, they all said that we don't really care, right, who needs the dough. It's not important, right? Or the one who bakes it, right? Rabbeinu Yonah ibn Giyat, I'm sorry, Rabbeinu Yitzchak ibn Giyat, right? It says this rabbi, right, Rabbeinu Hai, and also this rabbi, Katvu Matza shenidlosha al yedei goy. So they said, right, if the matzah was needed by a goy, bifnei Israel, right, and there was a Jew there, watching over, mutar, it's allowed to have that. The Hasidim machmirim. So he says, but the pious people are stringent about this, right? So what do? They knead and bake by themselves, right? They don't have somebody doing it for them, some goy or some child, whatever, right? Some retard, things like this, right? Okay. כתב עוד שם, he writes furthermore there, right? טוב ללמד נשים שתאמרנה על כל אחד לחברותיה, כל מי שתגיע לידה מצה שלי בשגגה, תהא שלה, ואם לאו כן, הוויה מצה גזולה. So he writes something, right, like a postscript over PS, right? That also, it's a good idea to tell the ladies that, right, if you have a matzah that came to you from somewhere else, that right, by mistake, that it should be theirs. In other words, it's a good idea to say, right, like this, if one of my matzot that I baked comes to my friend by mistake, right, I hereby declare that it's that it's theirs. In other words, I give it to him as a gift. I'm not particular about it. Why is that? Because he says, right, if it's stolen, it's going to be a problem, right? To the mitzvah with stolen matzah. That's what he's saying. Okay, very good. So we're done with the Bet Yosef. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch like this: Ematay mafrishin chala. Right. This is the whole discussion here. What we covered yesterday. Right. When do we separate the chala? Kesheiten hamayim ve'areva kemach b'mayim. When you put the water. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is the wrong one. This is definitely the wrong one. Okay, we're digressing here to a different thing. Okay. This is not the one. Maybe I need to bring it up. Let's see. Bring it up. I'm not really sure what's going on. It should be already up, but okay, whatever. Of Samech. Okay. Okay. No, this is the wrong one. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch here. So we probably read this one yesterday, but I'll just read over. I'm just not really sure what we did. So it says, "En lashin matzat mitzvah velo ofin ota al yedei eno yehudi velo al yedei cheresh shota v'katan." Right. So very simple, right? That we shouldn't need the matzah of mitzvah, right? The one you're doing the mitzvah with, and you shouldn't bake it by way of who? By way of a goy, number one, and also right these three categories, as we said, right? The child, the retard, right, and the one who is deaf mute. So as we said yesterday, the reason is because the goy, right, will not have intention for the mitzvah. Since he's not, he's not into mitzvot, right? That's not his thing. Right? So he's gonna, think about something else. I don't know what he's gonna think about. Whatever he's thinking there, right? He has his own mind, right? So he's independent. That's the goy. And these other three that we mentioned, right? The problem with them is they don't really have intellect. So therefore, right, we can't really, assume or whatever, right, or think that they're going to have intention of mitzvah. And as we said right yesterday, that since they don't really have intellect, that means they can't really guard the matzot. They can't guard it. And guarding requires intention, right? Because it's a mitzvah. So this is the whole thing, it's all interwoven right together. This whole concept here. That's the way it is. Yeah. So that's Shulchan Aruch Let's see if we have another one here to do. Bet. Yeah, so we also do this one. So it says here, right? הראש היה משתדל ממצות מצווה מעובד על עשייתה ומזרז העוסקים בהם ומסייע בעריכתן. Right? So as we said yesterday, right? It tells you here the custom of the Rosh, right? So, the Rosh was a big rabbi, right? He was about 700 years ago, right? Approximately. One of the big rabbis, right? And the Bet Yosef is considered to be like one of the big three, the big three, the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. So he's a big guy, this guy, right? Not a little guy. So one of the big Chachamim, right? And believe me, I'm understating how big he was. He was actually very, 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 very big, right? More than I can even describe. So anyway, right? It says regarding him, as we saw in the Bet Yosef, that and the Tur, right, brings over. I'm sorry, not Bet Yosef. The Tur brings down that his father, the Rosh, used to participate in the baking of the matzah. So he would take a part of that, take a cut. He would take a cut of right doing the matzot. So he would go to the bakery, right, roll up his sleeves, and do some work there, right? And why did he do that? Because he wanted to have a right. He wanted to not rely on this kind of thing. Yeah, well, somebody else will do it. Okay, somebody else will do it. Yeah, but right? It's better when you do it yourself, right? When it comes to mitzvot, sometimes most of the time. So therefore, right, the Rosh would go in and do the matzot himself. And as I said, right, that there was many other big rabbis also who did this until this day, right? There are rabbis who do this, pious rabbis who go to the bakery, and they participate in the whole event, right? Hands-on approach, as we say, right? וכן ראוי לכל אדם לעשות לטפל הוא בעצמו במצווה. So says the Shulchan Aruch, right, that's the proper thing to do for everybody, not only for big rabbis like the Rosh, but even for us little guys, right? Whatever, right? I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about you guys. You guys are big guys, but I'm a little guy, right? So anyway, the point is, right, that even little guys like me, should do this. But the truth is, I have to be honest with you. I haven't done it myself. I haven't had the chance to do this mitzvah of making the matzot myself. Maybe one day, B'ezras Hashem, I'll be zoche. Maybe this year. I don't know. Don't another. Right. So anyway, right. That's the way it is. So it tells the Shulchan Aruch it's proper for everybody to take a part of this. The truth is, that actually one time I did do it. The truth is I wasn't really doing much. I was just watching. What happened was that one time, when I was learning in a kollel in Jerusalem, so we had some guys there who were like very, from a good family, who are, they're very well rooted in Torah and mitzvot, right? These people over there, right? So what happened was that we invited. He had like a cousin, who does this, makes the matzot himself. So what we did was we invited his cousin, right? Somebody who was learning in our kollel. He's also a rabbi himself. All rabbis, these people are all rabbis. In Jerusalem, everybody's a rabbi. That's the way it is, So, so what do you call it? So what happens is, right, that we invited him to our kollel to do matzot there, right? So he came, with nice apron, whatever, right? So he shouldn't get his clothing dirty. Right, and we rolled up our sleeves. I wasn't really rolling up much myself. I don't think I did anything. As far as Emra, I don't think I did anything myself. I just watched the process. So what we did was, we made the matzot like the Sephardi way, soft, a soft matzot, pita, like a pita, like a lafa, whatever, right? If you're a little bit familiar with the Israeli food, you know what those things are, right? So that's the way it is. We made like that, and so we made the matzot, and he brought flour, and we mixed it with water, and we did the whole thing from scratch, So now here's the question. Here's the funny thing is, right, that what did we use, to make the matzot? As we said, right, we weren't in a bakery. We were in the kollel, over there, sitting in a little room, in the kollel. So how do you make matzot in a kollel, right? What do you do? So, you know what he did? Something incredible. I couldn't believe it. He bought an electric grill, electric barbecue. You ever seen one of these things? In America, I don't see them very often, but in Israel, they're very common, electric barbecue. So instead of like using coals, you're using like these these metal hot these what do they call those things, right? That they heat up, then they become like fire, these metal pieces. So that's what we were using, like electric barbecue. And we made the matzot on an electric barbecue. We didn't even have an oven. Can you imagine such a thing like this? And they came out very nice. I was very happy with the results. I mean, what I mean to say is that it looked beautiful. It didn't taste so good, but don't ask me why. I don't know why the taste wasn't so good. As we said, right? The problem with matzot is we don't use salt. We don't use salt for baking matzot. So because of that, the taste can be sometimes very, raunchy kind of, with the matzot, depending on what kind of flour you use. So over there in Israel, usually, right, the flour that they bring in there to bake bread comes from America, the bread basket of the world, right? Kansas, whatever, right? So it comes from there. But when it comes to making matzot, right, they grow the wheat over there, like in Israel. And they make it like whole wheat, so it had like a little bitter taste, whatever. So it was like quite bitter, a little bit, whatever. But it looked beautiful. It was very nice, it came out really good. So yeah, so you can write you can be creative with these things. Sometimes you don't even you have to use an oven. You can make a matzot with an electric grill. Okay, whatever, right? So the point is, right, that I almost got a chance there to do something myself, but I don't think I did anything in the end, right? I was just watching, but it was very interesting, whatever. So one day, Bezat Hashem, right? We'll billionaire there. We'll roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves, right? And to do this mitzvah, the Shulchan Aruch, that everybody should have a portion in this, whatever. That's why we're learning it, by the way. That's one of the reasons why I'm teaching you guys these halachot, because I want you to be able to make matzot yourself. That's the whole idea. Okay, good. So let's go on a little bit. So yeah, there's another Shulchan Aruch here. I think we already covered this material. So it says like here, right? But let me just see if there's any bit Yosef before we go on. Yeah, so I think this one we didn't do yet, but let's do the bit Yosef. The tour we read. So we already said in the tour like this, right? That if there's any right crumbs that fall out, when you're making the matzot, and they fall on the floor or whatever, right? So what you should do is nullify them because they may become leavened. So this way you won't have any benefit for whatever you won't transgress anything, any prohibition. So it says regarding that, the Bet Yosef, Ken Katav Mordechai, it's from Mordechai. It's also written there, but very common, the first parak. V'chen katvu hagot memoniot, also hagot memoniot, right? The parak Gimel, b'shem Rokach, in the name of the Rokach.
Kavod Harav, who's the Rokach?
It's it's not really his name, right? It's the name of his book.
Okay.
The book called Rokach.
Thank you.
No, but I don't really know what the name of the rabbi is.
I can look it up.
I'll have to look at that. Yeah, we'll have to Google that.
Okay, I'll
See
probably
what it is.
try to do that.
Right, it's one of the early authorities, one of the Rishonim, Rokach.
Thank you.
Okay, God bless. So anyway, right, the rabbi, my rabbi, Maran Shalom, he knew the name of every rabbi. Like he was so expert in all these rabbis. He knew the name of everyone, and he also knew the chronology. In other words, which rabbi preceded which one came first, which one came last. He had like an encyclopedic mind. Everything was inside his brains there. Right, recorded there. So he had this talent. For every he memorized everything. Everything was in his memory. So but for us little guys, don't have some memory like that, or whatever. We don't have the right what do you call it, right? We haven't studied that much, like you did. So whatever. But anyway, right? Katu od v'chen טוב שיעשה לבצק הנדבק בכלים, ששמא לא יוכלו להסירו עד שיהיה חמיץ. So he says also another thing, right? Furthermore, right? Something similar, that if you have a dough, right, which stuck to a utensil, right, and you can't remove it, right? So there also, what you should do is, nullify it. So he says, what's the reason why you have to nullify it before it becomes leavened? Mishum de batar isura lab bershutahu. Because once the prohibition already comes in of chametz, right? You can't nullify anymore. Right? It's too late. That's it. It's not in your possession anymore. So therefore, it's too late. Right? So do it now, before Passover comes in. Before the prohibition comes in, because once the prohibition of chametz comes in, there's no way to nullify anymore. So that's the thing. Okay, very good. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Now we understand more, right? Better, a little bit better. What's going on? So says Shulchan Aruch, halash achar zman isur chametz yomar beshat lisha, kol perurim sheiplu beshat lisha vericha, right? וכן בצק הנדבק בכלים, אני מבטל אותם, כדי שנמצא מבטלן קודם החימוצן. Right. So he says, right, like this, that if you are, right, baking the matzah, okay, and you're doing this after the prohibition has already started. So let me ask you a question, right? When does the prohibition of matzah start, of chametz start? When does it begin? So as we said, right, it doesn't begin with the holiday. It starts before the holiday. So meaning what? Even though the holiday starts at night, right? Once you have dusk, right? Whatever, right? The stars come out, all that, right? But when it comes to the prohibition of chametz, it starts in the morning. Right? After the 4th hour in the morning, you can't eat anymore. And after the 5th hour, you have to destroy it, right? That's it. It has to be gone. That's it, right? There's nothing. So once that time comes in, the 5th hour is over, you cannot nullify anymore because it's not in your possession. That's what he's trying to say, right? So therefore, right, that's why you want to, right, what you want to do is nullify it before it leavens. Because once it leavens, there's no way to nullify anymore because it's already prohibited. So therefore, if you're making the dough, if you're making the matzot, after the prohibition of chametz has already come in, right? Has already commenced. So then what you do is, as we said, right, you nullify. And this way, right, you do it right away, and before it becomes chametz. And this way, right, there won't be any prohibition, right? You won't transgress anything. Because once it becomes chametz, you cannot nullify. Too late. Why is it too late? Because there's already prohibition. That's what he's saying. So good. So that applies to two things, right? As we said, it applies to crumbs that fall on the floor, right, etc., etc. And also, right, if you have a dough that's stuck got stuck on a utensil, right, and you're not able to scrape it off, whatever, right, and so it's stuck there. So you should nullify that, right, because once it becomes chametz, it's going to be too late, as we said. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll go on. Let's go on a little bit. Okay. So it says in a tour like this, right? En osin srikin metsuyarin, right? Right. From the words, right? It implies like this. You shouldn't like make how can we say this, right? Don't make designer matzah. Right? What does that mean, designer matzah? That it has like, all kinds of pictures, like, shapes, things like this. So let's see, right, how that works. I'm just giving you right, just a, introduction into this, right? But let's see how that's all the details we gotta find. The Per Kol Sha'ah, right? It says over there in Per Kol Sha'ah, Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, says Beit Yosef. This is the source. Tan Rabbanan, Yotzin B'Srikin HaMetzuyan Pesach. So, right, the first opinion says here that we can fulfill our obligation with this kind of, designer matzah, right? As we said, right? Afapi Shamu Enosin Srikin Metzuyan Pesach. Even though they said we shouldn't do that, אמר רב יהודה, דבר זה שאל בעיתו בן זונין לחכמים, מפני מה אמרו אין עושים סיכים מצוין בסך. So this rabbi, right, asks the rabbis, this guy asks the rabbis, he says, why does it say that we shouldn't make these, on Passover, right? These designer things. So he says, אמרו מפני שהאישה שוהה עליהן ומחמצתן. אמר להן, אפשר, יעשנה בדפוס ויקפאנה, כיוון right, כיוון אמרו, לא יאמרו כל הסריקין אסורים וסריקין ביתוס מותרים. So here's the thing, right? It asks over here, right? What's the reason why the rabbi said not to make these designer matzot? So the answer is, right, a good answer. It says, the problem is, that once the woman starts getting into these shapes, making special shapes and designer stuff there, right? The problem is that we're afraid because this takes some time to make these shapes, that it's going to become chametz. And this is the reason why they said, listen, like you want to be a designer, like, go to Manhattan, learn, right, and become a designer. But you know what I'm saying? But this is not the place for you to be a designer in the matzah factory. This is not the place for that. You know what I mean? You can. We'll find you a place to be a designer. So this is not the place for that. Because it's going to take too long. So Gemara asks, but wait a second, right? There's a way to do it also fast. It shouldn't take long. How is that? You use a mold, right? You just like pour it into the mold, and the mold will shape it, right? So why don't you do it like that? This way it'll be quick, right? No problem. It's not going to leaven. So they answered him, you know what? The rabbis can't make differentiations like that. Your design, my design, your design is fast, my design is slow. So the rabbis, decreed on all designs. You know what I mean? Because, once you must start making these differentiations, it becomes confusing to people, Well, yeah, if you do it with a mold, it's okay, yeah. But if you do it with your hand, and whatever, you're an artisan, you're an artist, right? Whatever, right? It's not okay. Who wants this kind of stuff, right? So the rabbi just made a sweeping decree, that it's all forbidden, right? All designer matzot. That's what we're saying over here.
Are you permitted to add like seasonings or like spices or herbs?
All right. So we already said, if I'm not mistaken, that you shouldn't use salt and pepper. Because they heat up the dough, right? And if I'm not mistaken, regarding other spices, we said it's okay. But the truth is, nobody does it today, nobody uses any spices. So, we have to go back there and see what was the conclusion of the Beit Yosef, regarding other spices. I think we kind of like said, you shouldn't use any spice, but I have to go back there and, recall. We definitely said salt and pepper is not allowed. That I remember clearly, right? The other spices I'm a little bit foggy. I don't recall. I'll look back there. I'll let you know tomorrow. Bezat Hashem. Or I'll text you, right? Whatever. We'll text.
Kavod Harav, I don't think we went into detail with the spices. We did mention salt and pepper, but not other spices.
Yeah, my mind is a little bit cloudy. I don't recall so I'll look back. It doesn't hurt to do a little review.
I don't remember if you did mention sesame. No.
I'm gonna tell you. Yeah, we mentioned a lot of things. We mentioned, I'm gonna tell you a big chidush, right? Novel idea. There is no prohibition to review your studies. There's no prohibition. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay. You know why I tell you this? It's like we had a joke, when I had a chavruta in Israel, I was learning with somebody over there. So, this guy, he was working and he would come and learn with me, on his right spare time. So, like one time, we were learning and, I started reading and he tells me, oh, it says, Rabbi, we already did this. So I told him, yeah, okay, maybe so, but there's no prohibition to review, I guarantee you that, right? That I know for sure. The spices I'm a little bit foggy, but when it comes to reviewing, there's no prohibition, right? Just the opposite. It says in the Talmud that reviewing is considered to be a great mitzvah, because learning one time is not enough. You know what I mean? You forget. So it says in the Talmud like this, right? The famous statement: the one who reviews 101 times, right, is not the same as the one who does 100 times. In other words, the one who does 101 is much greater than the one who does 100. So can you imagine? We're talking about reviewing 100 times. That's what we're talking about. That's what they used to do in the old days, when men were men, right? Whatever, right? And the ladies were in the kitchen, they weren't even coming to learn, in the Bet Yosef, right? And now it's the things are different, right? Now the ladies are here in the Bet Yosef class. So, things have changed. Okay, so you get the idea. Okay, I'm joking all around. So anyway, right, but there's some truth behind it also. Okay, so as we said, right, that we don't want to make these designer matzot, right? Forget about that stuff, Just make it round, right, or square, like whatever, like everybody else. Don't be a wise guy. Okay, so yeah. So he says, Amar Rabbi Elazar בר צדוק, פעם אחת נכנסתי אחר אבא לבית הרבן גמליאל והביאו לפניו סריקין המצוינים בפסח. אמרתי, אבא, לא ככה אמרו חכמים, אין עושים סריקין המצוינים פסח. אמר לי, בני, לא של כל אדם אמרו, אלא של נחתומים. איכא דאמרי הכי כאמר של נחתומים אמרו, אלא לא כל אדם. Yeah, so anyway, right, he brings a story over here into the Talmud regarding this issue, right? He says, yeah, one time we went, to the house of this big rabbi, right? Rabbi Gamliel, right? He was the big rabbi there. So, he says, right, that we saw that they brought matzot, designer matzot, for us to eat. How could that be, right? But then he says, I asked my father, but didn't the rabbi say you're not supposed to do designer matzot? So what happened over here? So he answers him like this, right? He answers him, no, you got it wrong, he says. You don't have it right. There's two answers over here, right, that they give you here. So let me give you both of them, right? So he says, that only applies to bakers, he says, right? Not to homeowners, right? So at home, you can do designer. But the bakers, they forbade to do that. That's one answer, right? And then there's another answer, which is just the opposite, right? That he says, not the bakers, only the homeowners, right? So in other words, this guy was getting it from a bakery, so it's okay. So there's two different answers, right? Here. I don't know which one do you prefer. But we'll see, right? We'll see which answer is better. So he says, right, Peresh Rashi, Besrikina Matsuyanin. So he says, right, that matzot hamatzuyarot afal pi she'amru lechatchila asur le'avad shafit haben. So says Rashi, right, that even though lechatchila they told you not to make designer matzot, but he says b'diavad it's mutar. In other words, once you made it, it's allowed to eat it. You don't have to throw it out. It's not that bad. That's one thing. Right. So then he says shohe alehen letzayran ven notrin. So he says, right, Rashi explains, the problem is, when you start making those designs, that it gets delayed and it could become chametz, that's the problem. As we explained. אפשר יעשה אסורת לפוטפוס בכוונה ובשריק, כיוון כלומר מדחיפה אחת, יאמרו כל הסריקין אסורים ושל בית הסמותיים. שהרי רוב הנחתמים אין להם אותו דפוס, לא של כל אדם אמרו, לאסור לבעל הבית עושה אותם מעצמו, אינו חושש לפותם כל כך, ואינו שואל עליהם. So Rashi explains, right, like this, that, we just gave two answers, right, regarding this question that we just had. So the two answers were like this, right? One answer is, it's allowed for the baker to do it, but not for the homeowner, right? And the other one is the layman, right? We call that the layman, the homeowner, right? The layman. So, in the Hebrew, we call that balabait, right? Okay. So anyway, right, the other answer was the opposite, right? That it's allowed for the layman, but not for the baker. So Rashi explains, right, according to the first answer, that it's so so Rashi explains, right, according to the answer that says that it's allowed for the layman. Why is that? So he says the reason is because the layman is not so particular to make the shape so so beautiful, right? So precise. So he doesn't take that long, So we're not concerned about that. But the baker, he's a professional, right? So he wants to get that shape, that beautiful color, that beautiful right picture there, right? So therefore, right, he's going to take longer. So this is the reason why we forbid the bakers to do that. That's one way to look at it, right? So then, according to the other answer, how do we explain that? According to the other answer, right, that it's allowed for bakers to do so, but not for the layman. According to that, explains Rashi, the reason is because, the baker is professional, so he does it quickly. You know what I mean? Like he's got those good hands. He's got those good fingers, so he knows how to do it very fast. He's not going to take a long time. He's a pro. So therefore, we're not concerned about that. But the layman, this guy, by the time he finishes his designer matzah, right, it'll be already, right, it'll be already like a baguette, it'll be all totally chametz, because he doesn't, he can't do it so fast. He's not a pro. He doesn't have those special hands. So that's the thing, right? So we explain it both ways. We'll have to see what's halacha, right? That's the main point, right? What's halacha? Katav Rosh Zal, Pasak Arif, the Rosh says, right, the Rit Paskin, Kika Diamre, like the second opinion. Interesting. The had the lo pasak kechachamim. So why didn't he pass like the chachamim? The first opinion. The lo mifalge ben nachtomim l'shar kol adam. That they don't differentiate between, right, the baker and the layman. Lefi shenireh lo maaser rav l'chora says because he says the story that they brought, is really the demonstration. So therefore, right, it's more authoritative than just the halacha. The story is more authoritative. So it says, right, that the le'el lo pasak harif karabi akiva avafa pi she'asa maseh elav demesay le'uvda de Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi shehu emora ad kan hashano ולשון עריף הכי יתה ולא של נחתומין בלבד אמרו אלא של כל אדם אבל של נחתומין כיוון דבקיה לא שהו בראש מפרסו. Right, the Rif explains, right, that like we already explained according to Rashi, same thing, בראש מפרש שמה שכתב אבל שנחתומין, that what she said, the Rosh says like this, right, that what she said, that when it comes to bakers, כיוון בקיה לא שהו בהו, since they're professional, they don't delay too much. פסק הלכה שפוסק הריף, ואף על פי שלפי זה לא הווה לומר, ולא של נחתמין בלבד, אמרו, דמשמע דשל נחתמין נמי אסור. שמא לא היה כתוב בלבד בנוסח הריף, שביד הראש אלא, ולא של נחתמין אמרו, לפיכך כתב הריף, right, כתב שהריף פוסק להתיר בשל נחתמין, אבל הר"ן, so in other words, the way he says like this, right, the way the Rosh understood the Rif is that, the Rosh understands the Rif that the Rif permits the baker. But the Ran, he says not so, right? דאחי כמה, מתחילה לא גזרו בשביל נחתומים, אלא בשביל כל אדם. דאלמה, אבל נחתומים, כיוון דבקיה בהו שרו מדינה. אלא שגזרו על הכל, וגזרו על הנחתומים, עטו שר כל בן אדם. So it says the Ran differently, right? He says that at first, they only decreed on the layman, right? Because, they're not professional, right? But not on the bakers. But he says then they extended also the decree to bakers as well. Why? Because even though the bakers are quick, and they know how to do the job without having problems, but still he says if you allow the bakers, then you also, right, they may come also, the layman also may come to do it. So therefore they forbade everybody. Okay. But he says the Rav Magid explained the Rif like the Rosh. כמו שפירשם מראש, וכתב שכן פסקו הגאונים. That says that's the way the Gaonim also paskin. וכן דת הרמב"ם, also the Rambam paskins like that. ומה שכתב רבנו, אבל כל מה שעושים אותו במסק, כדי שלא יתפח מותר. Okay, that's already something else. We didn't read this tour yet. Okay, so let me just see how far this goes. Okay, so I guess we'll do this next time, Bezat Hashem. We'll finish the chapter, B'lei Neder, right, next week. Bezat Hashem, we'll see you on Sunday. Right, so have a Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for coming tonight. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. I don't need to bless you because the Torah will bless you. The fact that you study Torah, you're already blessed, But anyway, might as well out my 2 cents also, Why not, Give you a little bit extra. So whatever, right? So Bezat Hashem, Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you Sunday night. Bezat Hashem. Same Zoom channel. Bezat Hashem. Always as usual. Laila Tov.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
All the best.
Shalom.